The words float across the airwaves, yet behind them, a storm has been quietly brewing. On a warm spring morning, the world woke to a headline that made hearts stop, fingers tremble, and believers whisper in disbelief. It was a story that would ripple through churches, boardrooms, and private homes, striking at the very image of a man many had followed for decades, Pastor Creflo Dollar. The news was shocking, almost surreal, a combination of controversy, secrecy, and a deeply human fragility that no one had expected. And yet, behind the flashing cameras, behind the viral clips and trending hashtags, there was a man sitting alone in his study, surrounded by silence, facing a reality that would forever change him and those who loved him. The story begins not with the headline, but in the quiet hours before dawn, in the moments where decisions are made in solitude and regrets quietly take root. Pastor Dollar had always presented himself as a beacon, an unshakable figure preaching prosperity, faith, and divine favor. But even the strongest towers can hide cracks, and the world was about to see them. What led to the explosive news that left millions questioning faith, trust, and integrity? It was a chain of hidden truths, whispered secrets, and decisions made in shadows that no one had anticipated. Friends, family, and congregants would later speak of the nights they saw him retreat into silence, a faraway look in his eyes, the weight of something unspeakable pressing down on his shoulders. The tragedy of it all was that these moments were never meant to be public. Moments of confession, moments of private sorrow, moments that carried the invisible scars of a man torn between duty, image, and human weakness. IT began with a phone call that shattered the rhythm of an ordinary Sunday morning. The voice on the other end was calm but insistent, delivering news that seemed impo. It was a slow, suffocating pressure, one that led to moments of quiet emotional breakdowns in rooms no one would ever enter, moments of confession that he recorded but never released, moments of staring at the ceiling late at night, whispering apologies to God, to his family, and to the millions who looked to him as an example. In the shadows of the mansion, the truth lingered like a ghost, a specter that refused to be silenced, a secret that could no longer remain hidden. Some nights, he would walk to the window and watch the city below, reflecting on the intersections of faith, power, and human frailty. Memories of past triumphs, large congregations, celebrity endorsements, appearances on global stages, were now tinged with a haunting uncertainty. He thought of the ill and the suffering, of those who had sought guidance and found themselves questioning not just him, but their own beliefs. And he thought of the tragic irony, that the very ministry meant to inspire hope could now be the source of disappointment and pain. The story was only beginning, but already it carried the weight of betrayal, love, and the complicated dance of public and private life. A story that would shock the world and forever challenge the man known as Pastor Creflo Dollar. Beloved, the morning after the news broke was like stepping into a dream laced with sharp edges. The world had already formed its verdict, and social media feeds were flooded with condemnation, speculation, and, in some corners, sympathy. Yet inside the walls of his home, Pastor Dollar experienced a silence more profound than any headline could capture. He moved through rooms that had once felt like sanctuaries, now heavy with echoes of conversations never meant to be heard outside these walls. Each step seemed to remind him of the fragility of reputation, the delicate threads connecting public image to private truth. The truth, as he had learned over decades, was a dangerous thing, beautiful, sacred, but capable of unraveling everything if exposed in the wrong way. He found himself in his private study, the place where so many sermons, prayers, and dreams had been conceived, staring at letters he had written to God in times of doubt. The weight of secrecy was suffocating. It was not just the scandal that shook him. It was the realization that his own imperfections, the hidden corners of his soul he had tried to guard, were now exposed for the world to dissect. Memories of nights spent in deep, silent prayers returned. Moments where he had wept alone, asking for strength, guidance, and forgiveness for missteps that no one would understand. The contrast between those private confessions and the public storm now raging outside was unbearable. The man who had once stood tall on massive stages, commanding thousands with unwavering certainty, now felt unmoored, vulnerable in a way he had never known. Family became the center of his emotional landscape. Yet even there, he found no simple solace. His children, young adults with their own fragile worlds, were caught between loyalty and confusion. He remembered the night before the story broke, watching them sleep, feeling a deep, suffocating dread. How could he protect them from the world's judgment, while also confronting his own guilt? There were moments where he imagined the headlines twisting their lives too. Friends whispering in school halls, distant relatives sending judgmental messages, strangers on the internet dissecting every gesture. The private agony of a father who feared his children's pain mingled with the public scrutiny of a leader whose every action was now questioned. The collision was relentless, grinding away at the inner fortitude that had long defined him. Even trusted advisors and longtime friends seemed distant in these hours, unsure how to approach a man whose life had suddenly become a global narrative. The quiet betrayal of trust, or perhaps the fragility of loyalty, became painfully clear. He thought of those who had once shared secrets in confidence, laughed in private, and strategized late into the night. And now, in the aftermath, silence prevailed. Their voices were absent when he most needed counsel, their presence replaced by the relentless echo of cameras, tweets, and headlines. Loneliness became a tangible force, pressing down on him as he reflected on choices made decades earlier, the hidden regrets tucked beneath layers of charisma, sermons, and public victories. There were moments when illness crept into his consciousness. Not just the physical toll of decades of relentless work, but the psychological and spiritual strain that now threatened to consume him. Sleepless nights, pounding headaches, a racing heart. They all spoke to a body and mind taxed beyond endurance. And yet, the greatest affliction was not physical, but emotional. The heartbreak of realizing that faith, influence, and devotion could be tested in ways he had never prepared for. He thought of those who had come to him for healing and guidance, the sick and the struggling, and felt the sting of irony that now, the shepherd was the one in need of salvation. The world may have seen a story of scandal, but inside, it was a crucible of regret, repentance, and a desperate search for meaning. And in these most intimate, painful hours, the truth began to crystallize, not as a story to be broadcast, but as an internal reckoning. Each regret, each secret, each hidden pain demanded acknowledgement. There were memories of conversations never shared, apologies never spoken, and moments of kindness or failure that had been forgotten, buried beneath the weight of ambition and expectation. For Pastor Dollar, the revelation was devastating. That legacy, reputation, and faith were intertwined with human frailty in ways that could neither be fully controlled nor completely hidden. The tragedy of it was that the world would see only fragments, headlines, and viral clips, never the depth of heartbreak, introspection, and quiet sorrow that defined the man behind the ministry. Legendary. The word once meant admiration, inspiration, reverence. Now, in the wake of the story, it carried a hollow echo, a reminder of how quickly adoration could turn to scrutiny. Pastor Dollar felt it deeply as he prepared to face the cameras, to craft a statement that would reach millions, but never fully reveal the truth. Even with carefully chosen words, a polished delivery, and the guidance of public relations experts, he knew the world would never grasp the private toll of what had occurred. Behind every measured sentence was a man wrestling with shame, regret, and the haunting knowledge that some mistakes leave indelible marks, not just on reputation, but on soul, family, and faith. Late one evening, after the initial wave of media frenzy had subsided, he wandered through his home, stopping in front of the grand piano that had once been a source of solace. Fingers hovered above the keys, yet no music came. His mind replayed moments he wished he could erase. Conversations with congregants who had confided their deepest struggles, moments of laughter and prayer, decisions made under pressure that now seemed naive or misguided. He remembered one particularly bitter argument with a trusted mentor, a confrontation over pride and humility that had left a permanent scar on their relationship. Now, in solitude, those unresolved conflicts returned, mingling with the fresh pain of public exposure. The private wounds, once manageable, now bled into very waking thought. Family pain became a relentless companion. His spouse, steadfast and loving, struggled in ways that no one outside the home could perceive. There were whispered conversations in the middle of the night, tears exchanged in silent understanding, and the unspoken acknowledgement that life had irrevocably changed. Children, too, bore the weight of an unanticipated spotlight, their innocence suddenly interrupted by speculation and judgment from strangers. Pastor Dollar often caught himself staring at them, heart heavy with guilt, wondering how much of their laughter would survive the shadow cast by his missteps. Every attempt at reassurance felt inadequate. Every embrace tinged with the awareness that the world's gaze could pierce even the most private moments. The scandal had ripple effects far beyond his immediate circle. Friends in Hollywood, some of whom had walked the delicate line between fame and faith, actors, producers, even a few who had confided spiritual struggles in his counsel, now approached cautiously. Conversations were strained, handshakes tentative, smiles rehearsed. He recalled late-night visits from figures whose presence once brought comfort. A Hollywood star quietly seeking guidance about career and conscience. A music legend confiding struggles with family and faith. All these connections, once vibrant and sustaining, now felt tenuous, delicate threads that could snap under the weight of public attention. In their eyes, he saw questions unspoken, trust-tested, and an unspoken understanding that some bridges might never be rebuilt. And yet, amid the turmoil, there were flashes of the man he once was, the pastor, the healer, the guide. Late-night calls from longtime congregants, emails filled with encouragement, and messages from strangers whose lives had been transformed by his teachings reminded him that hope and impact endured even in darkness. But these reminders were bittersweet, for each note of support also underscored the gravity of the fallout. Pastor Dollar's internal landscape was now a landscape of contrasts. Love and judgment, forgiveness and regret, faith and human frailty. The emotional toll was palpable, leading to nights of prayer that stretched into dawn, moments where his voice cracked in confession, moments where tears flowed freely in the absence of an audience, and moments where he whispered apologies into the empty room, hoping someone, somewhere, could understand the depth of his remorse. The world outside continued its relentless march. Headlines evolved, viral clips circulated, and debates raged across screens of every size. Yet inside the home, time moved differently. Every day was a battle to reconcile the man he had been with the man he now faced in the mirror. Decisions made in private hours, moments of honesty, confessions of fear, acknowledgments of past failures, became the most important work of all. There was a recognition that no amount of public explanation could capture the complexity of his journey, the private heartbreak, or the intimate reckoning with faith and morality. The crisis had become a crucible, forcing him to confront truths he had long deferred, testing the limits of endurance, compassion, and self-forgiveness. And in this quiet, grueling struggle, he began to glimpse a fragile, painful, yet undeniable path toward understanding, healing, and perhaps redemption. Respected, beloved, the story was far from over. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of the scandal seeped deeper into every corner of Pastor Dollar's life. The cameras had left the mansion, the flashing lights had dimmed, but the storm inside him raged with an intensity that no public statement could calm. Nights were the hardest. He would sit in his study, a dim lamp casting long shadows across LLS lined with books and awards, and replay every decision, every conversation, every secret he had tried so desperately to keep hidden. Regret was a constant companion, whispering accusations he could neither escape nor fully answer. Each memory seemed magnified in the silence. Hidden truths, unspoken apologies, moments where pride had overpowered humility, and choices that had hurt those he loved most. There were moments of profound isolation. Friends who had once been pillars of support, now called less frequently, unsure how to navigate a man who had become a global symbol of controversy. Even Hollywood connections, figures who had once embraced him in private for counsel or comfort, began to distance themselves. He remembered one late-night phone call from a famous actor, a quiet, trembling voice admitting admiration for his work, but also fear of being drawn into the fallout. That conversation ended in silence, leaving Pastor Dollar staring at the phone long after the line had gone dead, wondering if loyalty could survive when the world was watching. The family pain was visceral and inescapable. His spouse, the quiet anchor of his life, carried her own heartbreak in ways no one would ever see. Sleepless nights, whispered prayers, and moments of tears shed in private rooms while he paced restlessly elsewhere. His children felt the tremors of public scrutiny acutely. Friends' questions, social media whispers, the unrelenting sense that their father's name now carried both reverence and shame. Pastor Dollar's heart ached watching them navigate this altered reality, knowing that no words could shield them entirely. Each glance, each attempt at reassurance, was tinged with a desperation he could not fully articulate, an apology for the chaos, a plea for understanding, and a silent vow to protect them, even as he struggled to protect himself. Illness, too, began to make its presence known. Not the kind that could be treated with medicine, but the invisible wounds of stress, fear, and emotional exhaustion. The days grew heavy with the duality of existence, the private anguish that threatened to consume him, and the public expectation that he remain unshaken, composed, and faithful. Every interaction, every phone call, every glance from a loved one reminded him of the delicate balance he had to maintain. And in those moments of quiet, he confronted a stark, unavoidable truth: that life, faith, and influence are inseparably intertwined with vulnerability, mistakes, and the unpredictable consequences of human choice. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by pain and doubt. Yet beneath it all lay the faint glimmer of understanding, of a man beginning to reconcile with the past, even as the world watched, waiting for answers that might never fully satisfy.